Okay, welcome to Lenormand Class 2. Today we're talking about 9-card readings, and we're also going to talk about how to do a 9-card reading in the context of the Grand Tableau. As we've spoken about before, Lenormand cards have a simpler, more direct symbolism than tarot, and they're great for very practical, real-world, non-esoteric, what should I do about such and such type readings. We're going to start with our grounding before we dive into today's topic. So you can close your eyes, roll your head around on your shoulders a bit. Loosen up any part in your body that feels a little tense. I've had a long day and I had a client and a session and an interview, and yeah. Let's just take some deep breaths. We'll settle in. And we'll really set the intention to connect to our intuition and to connect to the Lenormand cards as a way of understanding our intuition and accessing Spirit's messages to us. So if there's anything else rolling around in your head, any to-do list or fears or concerns or other stuff going on in life, let's just let that fall away. And if you think you might need it later, you can visualize a basket at your feet, put your concerns or worries into that, pick them up on the way out. But for the moment, we're just going to stop thinking about anything that's distracting us from really boosting our intuition and our ability to use these cards to interpret what Spirit and our own intuition has to say to us. And I want to say thank you and enhance our connection to any positive spirits or energies that are here to help us. So Spirit, God, your ancestors, your power animals. Don't forget to respect and honor the spirits of the place where you're living or where you are currently, if you're in a coffee shop or the library. We'll just take a moment to thank those spirits for protecting this building that we're in, protecting the land that the building sits on, and helping us to feel really safe and secure. Knowing that all questions are valuable. If you have a question, somebody else out there in TV land probably has it too, so please feel free to ask. This is a safe space for us to share our deepest desires and dreams and concerns and struggles, get support. And I'm going to set the intention that we all will come away with what is for our own highest good, which is going to be different for everybody. And whether it's a technique with the Lenormand cards, or it's insight that we had, or it's just the experience of being supported in the group, that's what we're going to come away with. That will really help us on our journey. And that we can support each other emotionally and energetically while we're here, but when we leave, all cords will be cut. We won't carry anybody else's energy that's not for our highest good. We won't feel compelled to rescue each other from our terrible fates. We'll just support each other in love as we grow together in spirit, together with our higher selves. And I'm going to give you a chance to set your own intention. What is it that you are wanting to get out of tonight's class? What brought you here? Feel free to say that out loud or in your mind, whatever that is. My intention is to enjoy myself and have a great time and give you guys a wonderful experience tonight. And when you're ready, you can put your hand on your chest and repeat after me in my words, or you can use whatever words you want. And feel free to sit this portion out if you'd rather not do this. If English is not your birth language, feel free to repeat them in your birth language, which might be more powerful to you. And you can just say something like, I am grateful for the chance to be here and tap into my intuition and my spiritual connection. I am grateful for the chance to be here with these other beautiful souls in this safe place to understand myself better and tap even more deeply into my soul's wisdom. I am here to learn valuable techniques and take only what is best for me. Thank you to all the supportive spirits, both corporeal and non-corporeal, including all the other people around me who are here to support our beautiful therapeutic work. And feel free to add anything onto that you want to add for your own personal, heartfelt feelings. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and we will come back. Okay. Thank you, my friends. I'm always a huge fan of just tapping into spirit and into our intuition before we get started. Just as a note, once I start presenting, I cannot see the screen or the chat. So don't just raise your hand in the raise your hand box or raise your hand and think that I will see you, because it won't happen. You have to verbally interrupt me or wait till I stop the presentation to come back. Okay. So we're going to start. The first thing I wanted to do today was just share a personal sort of Lenormand experience that I had yesterday, actually. I had kind of a rough day yesterday. And I was really just feeling very emotional about some things that were going on and scared and frustrated. And I decided I needed to go for a walk and do a reading in some outside, like I needed to find some place out of my house to do a reading. And I walked for about 3 hours and I finally found a park just down the street from my house. And I sat on the swing and I pulled out my trusty travel altar, which is an Altoids tin. And I have a set of travel Lenormand cards, which I made. And I just wanted to demo these to talk about why the simple symbolism of Lenormand is so useful. And I'm not talking down tarot. I also read tarot. I think tarot is amazing. I got my first tarot card when I was 6 years old from my grandfather. I've always treasured it. But you can see this is my tin. This is literally the picture of me sitting on the swing. There's the bark in the playground underneath the swing. And you can see each of these Lenormand cards. There are 5 of them. I hope you guys can see them as they march across the screen here. Please, somebody should interrupt me if you can't see my screen for some reason. You can see each of these Lenormand cards is about the size of my thumb. And they're actually 1 inch by a 1/2 inch. They all fit, all 36 of them. And actually this is my deck, so it has 42 because I made 6 extra cards. Fit in this little bag, which fits in the Altoids tin, which fits in my back pocket. And I didn't draw anything, any letters on them. These are all symbols. So this is the workbench, which is a card I created, which represents work. That's the bear. It's a classic Lenormand card, which is a symbol of personal strength and power. Then we have lilies here, which is about spiritual growth and duty. Ship, which is about voyages or journeys. And then hands, which is another Lenormand card that I created because I wanted one that was specifically about one-on-one relationships. And so I just wanted you to see how you can make your own set. These were made from a cereal box that I literally took a ruler and cut out these little squares. And I decided to paint, kind of cartoony little symbols, but you could easily just write the words: bench, bear, lilies, ship, hands, whatever it is that you want to do. So I urge you to, not just go with the bought cards, but make your own set of cards, especially if you'd like to have a portable set or a set that you can tuck into your purse that doesn't take up very much space. Because I think that Lenormand cards really can be a great aid to us when we're out in the world. It doesn't have to be you've got your ritual set up and your candles are lit and everything like that. And this reading really kind of helped me get back on track. And really it was the lilies that helped me see that I was thinking in a very sort of worldly kind of physical way, and I needed to think much more spiritually. So yeah. Does anybody have any questions about what's in the picture or about the mini Lenormand deck, if you want to ask?
Is that your bone casting?
This thing in the background?
Like all that stuff in there, they're like charms and things, right?
No, actually, that's not my bone casting kit. This is stuff to set up a miniature ritual. And actually, maybe someday I'll teach a class on travel altars. these are like, there's crystals in here, there's a bottle cap for water, there are buttons, which are designed to symbolize the 4 elements. So this enables me to set up like a tiny altar if I went, you know, out in the river and things like that. Yeah, so it's not my bone casting kit. It's got different crystals. And then this was just something, this was a tea bag thing that I saw, tea bag wisdom. Talking to plants is one way of talking directly to spirit. So I just stuck that in there as well.
I love that. That's talking to me too.
Good, good. Yeah, I love having, I keep my travel altar in my purse. I take it everywhere I go, but I really wanted something that I could just stick into my pocket that wouldn't be cumbersome, but that would enable me to bring my spiritual connection out into the earth. So that's what that is. Yep. All right. Any other questions or thoughts about this? Make your own Lenormand deck. And I can show you guys at some point if you're interested, the whole deck itself. You can see all of it. But I just thought I'd show that I'm not just teaching about Lenormand. I actually am using them in the times of my direst spiritual need. All right. So today we are looking at the 9-card reading. And so there are various ways to interpret how the cards go together. And yes, this will definitely work with tarot, and it will also work with oracle decks if you decide you want to do it. Now, sometimes you can use a signifier. And if you don't know, a signifier is the process of choosing a card that represents the theme of your reading. So for example, if you were doing a relationship reading, you might decide to go with the ring card. You know what I just realized? Just give me a moment. I'm gonna show you guys something that I think might be helpful. All right, I was just taking a moment to share with everybody the link to the PDF on my website, which has the Lenormand card meanings. Here it is. And it's on my website at spiritsaid.com, which is here. And if you go to the free resources tab, you can see there are a bunch of, these are just a bunch of documents and lists of keywords and things like that I use in my work. And this is the Lenormand card signifier. So if you just click on this, it's a free PDF. It comes right up and you can have this on your screen or print it out. And it has use as a signifier, and then it has keywords for all of the cards. Also, Lenormand cards are typically either optimistic, challenging, or neutral, and that's what these little letters are. So N is for a neutral card, O is for an optimistic or positive card, and C is for a challenging card, which people used to call negative, but I don't really like that word, so I made that into challenging instead. Okay, so you can see there's a signifier list, right? So if you were doing a reading about a visitor, you might want to pick rider as your signifier. If you were doing a reading about a travel, like you're going somewhere, you might use ship as your signifier. If you're doing reading about family, you would choose house. So you can go through the signifier list and figure out which of those keywords seems like it's the most focused on what your reading is about. And then you pull that single card out of the deck. And then you choose 8 more cards to make a total of 9. So you choose the signifier because that's your topic. And then you choose 8 cards randomly with your magic shuffling when spirit tells you when to stop, or choosing them, fanning through the deck and just pulling them out when a card feels right, which is how I like to do it. So we're a total of 9. You don't have to use a signifier. Some people don't do that, and you can experiment with both ways, but I like the signifier because the signifier card often tells you how the topic itself is like situated with all the other cards that are going on. So like, for example, in this is a good reading to do for if you have a relationship, and you can choose the ring, which symbolizes the commitment aspect of the relationship. Or you can choose either the lady or the gentleman, whichever one of those you feel like is more aligned with how you identify or how the subject of the reading identifies if you're reading for a friend. Most Lenormand decks do not have somebody who has the they pronoun, although my Lenormand deck, when I publish it, will have a non-binary card. I believe there's a deck called the Queer Lenormand. So if you feel like you identify not as a lady or a gentleman, but as something else, you might check out that deck and see if that has a signifier that fits you more. So once you've picked out your signifier and your other 8 cards, you shuffle them together, and then you deal them out in a 3x3 grid. Part of the reason that Lenormand cards are traditionally smaller than tarot cards is that you often deal them out in these large grids. And we're going to do the 3x3 grid right now, and then we're going to expand that out into the Grand Tableau in the second part of our lesson. Any questions so far about the signifier or how to get the cards together?
I'm totally gonna do the whip now.
Are you wanting to do a reading about sex or about repetition?
I love how you put that on there. I didn't see that as one of the options.
Yeah, for sure. Well, sex is an important biological function. The whip typically symbolizes either sex, or it can also symbolize getting stuck in a rut or being in a cycle. So if you're like a whip, right, it just comes down on your back over and over and over again. So I didn't put that on there, but that's another signifier for the whip card, is if you're like, I'm stuck in this rut and I don't know how to get out. Whip is a good one for that. Yeah, great. Okay, any other questions about signifiers or dealing? Okay, so I'd like everybody to think about a question that is on your mind that you're willing to use today in practice. I already know somebody's interested in a relationship question, so you might be thinking about the ring. Or if you're like, what's wrong with me in relationships, you could pick the lady or the gentleman. Or we had somebody who's asking about career, and the bear is typically a symbol of your boss. Or if you think about your career and you think you're taking a journey in your career, you could use ship. Or flowers is a positive symbol of good things in your life. So if you're like, how can I have good things in my career? You might want to choose flowers. If anybody else has a question that they're wanting to ask about and you want help figuring out which of these signifiers is a good one to use, let me know. Anybody else have a question? They want help choosing a signifier?
I have a question. Can I use the fox as for work?
Sure, you totally could. Absolutely. Fox is a traditional one for work. It's just that I don't happen to have the fox in this particular example.
Okay.
But so for this example, you'll have to choose a different signifier. But absolutely, in Lenormand in general, fox is great for work. Yeah, perfect. Okay, anybody else? Okay. So what we're doing when we choose a signifier is the placement of the signifier helps us understand how that's playing out in our lives, because placement's everything in the 9-card reading. So what we have here is 3 positive cards in this reading. Flowers, clover, and ring are all positive traditionally, or optimistic, as I like to say. And we've got 1 negative card. That's the mountain. Now, I don't really say it's a negative card. I just used the plus and minus because that was easy in my presentation. But the mountain is a card that symbolizes a challenge or an obstacle, something that's hard and that takes work and that we typically have to grow through as far as we grow through the process of getting over that. So when we're talking about placement in a 9-card reading, now there are many other ways to read 9-card readings, and you can scour the internet and Pinterest and find other varieties. So I'm just giving the one that works well for me. But I always read the top as kind of the superficial situation, what things are looking like on the surface. And then the middle row is kind of what the person who's asking the question is experiencing. What's going on inside of them? How does this feel? What are they thinking about? And then the bottom row is the foundation. The bottom row is like, what's really beneath all of this? What do we have to get down to in order to understand the motivations or the influences in the situation? So it's time for a little audience participation. If anybody's interested in this, willing. What would it be like? I'm going to do a relationship reading here because that's what this was originally was. What would it be like in a relationship? How would you feel if the positive part was all on the surface? Superficially, things seem to be going really well and everything looked good. We've got a committed partner. We've got flowers, which is a gift. Things are going well. But deep down, you have a sense that there's an obstacle in the foundation. What kind of an emotions or experiences would that cause in somebody? On the surface, things look good, but there's an obstacle somewhere in the foundation.
Resentment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to say more about that? Why would that cause resentment?
Because you get all the things society says that make you happy, but you're not.
Yeah, exactly. Right. What else could we say about the mindset or the experience of the person who this reading is for? Based on superficial on the outside looks good, but deep down there's a problem. Anybody else like to contribute?
Feeling a bit uneasy about the relationship.
Yeah, definitely a sense of unease or insecurity could cause that. Maybe a sense of disjunction, like everybody outside is like, oh, you guys are so adorable. oh, you're so good together. Oh, you have a great relationship. But then in your heart, you're like, yeah, but there's this kind of feeling down there where we have problems, but people can't seem to see, right? It might lead you to feeling maybe not very seen, right? Or like, why doesn't everybody else see the challenges that we're having? So this is part of the first thing I do when I get a 9-card reading, is just to evaluate the general pattern of the positive cards versus the challenging cards. Where are they located? And then you guys did a great job, right? Tuning into your intuition. What could this possibly be causing? And if you are a professional reader or you're thinking of learning to read these for other people, this is one of these things that helps convince people you're an amazing reader. You look at this card and you're like, is it possible that you're feeling like everything's really great on the outside, but that deep down there's something that doesn't quite feel right, or it feels like it's in your way? And they're like, oh, how did you know that? Right? Because when you call out other people's emotions in a positive way, it helps them feel seen and it helps them feel safe. So this is like a pro reader tip for reading for others, is to evaluate the emotional balance in the reading. Any questions or thoughts about how I did that?
I just realized the lady is one of the random draw card because the man is the significator, but so the lady is not.
So this would depend on who I read for. I think in this case, for this reading, I think this was a reading for a woman.
Mhm.
So yeah, so the fact that they both showed up in this reading though, right next to each other, was definitely random. Well, random or dictated by spirit. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, gotcha. And
Yeah.
so,
Go ahead.
okay. So that's a neutral card, or it?
Yeah, the lady and the gentleman simply indicate that there is some feminine energy and some masculine energy involved somehow.
Okay.
But it doesn't say whether they're in a good place or a bad place, whether they're causing trouble, whether they're providing something positive. So actually, that's how we would, in order to do that, by the way, we would start looking at the cards around them. So for example, the lady here is right next to the positive card of the flowers.
Mm.
And the gentleman is right next to the positive card of the clover. So
Mhm.
if I were reading this, I would say that actually both of these people are probably pretty well intentioned. So whatever this obstacle is in the relationship, it probably isn't that these people are like harboring evil thoughts.
Mhm.
It's probably that they're not on the same wavelength, or there's a communication issue, or one or the other of them has some trauma or something from their past that's like standing in the way. So when you get a neutral card, you start looking at the cards around it to try to figure out whether this card is acting in a positive way or in a difficult way in the reading itself.
Okay.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also see like the stork and the ship and the bear is positive, but they're neutral actually.
Well, they can't, the thing is that they have the potential to be positive or negative. So
Mm.
like the clover card is almost never, like it can't really be a negative card.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, it's always something good.
Absolute. Okay.
Yeah, but like the bear, so the bear is personal power, right? That's a powerful person. Well, that's good if you're using your personal power in a sensitive way to achieve positive aims. But it wouldn't be so good if you were using personal power in a selfish way to achieve negative aims.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So like your personal power could be you needing to stand up for yourself at work. That would be positive. But the bear could also be like your overbearing boss who never listens to you and only wants to order you around, and that would be negative.
Mhm.
It's like the double-edged sword. Depends on which direction you're cutting. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. So in this case, for example, since we have the bear next to the mountain, I would say that personal power is actually part of the obstacle in this, which means that maybe one or the other of these partners is overbearing, although I would say that probably is not true because they're both next to such positive cards. But it's much more likely that one of these people is not actually using their personal power. And like they're letting somebody else trample over them, or they're not setting boundaries, or they're not speaking up when the other person hurts their feelings and they're just holding on to resentment. It's more likely that the personal power isn't really getting used somehow. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So we can see how the positives and negatives are going together. So another thing we can do is talk about this triple layers, right? What's going on the surface, what's going on in the middle, and what's going on the bottom. So if I were going to read this from a relationship standpoint, I would say that the lady here is the one who is more concerned with how things look on the outside. And perhaps things look good on the outside because people are looking at her, right? She's all together. Maybe she's not the kind of person who wants to air her dirty laundry in public. Maybe she's a very like loving, nice person. And so people look at her and she looks good. And so everybody's like, hey, it's a great marriage. It's a great relationship. You know, the middle guy here, I would say he's maybe not so concerned with the superficial aspect of the relationship, but you can see that he's looking away from the lady, right? Traditional Lenormand decks have 2 lady cards and 2 gentleman cards, and they look in opposite directions. So one faces to the right, one faces to the left. So if I were reading this, I would say that part of their problem, in fact, is that the guy is very focused on these little positive things, but maybe he's not so aware of what's going on with her. Can you see that just the way he's facing suggests that these 2 aren't really on the same wavelength, even though this marriage looks good and there's a strong sense of commitment. And then when we get to the foundation, if I was asking who's having a personal power problem, like how is this power an obstacle? Then I would be like, well, the guy is probably the one exercising his power. Like he's probably just doing whatever he does, maybe sort of obliviously to the lady, you know, because he's focused on all these little positive things that are going on with the clover. And the lady is probably the one who is not using her personal power because she's focused on all this superficial stuff. And so she's not really dealing with the foundation of the relationship, which is that she needs to stand up for herself or be more communicative or help him understand when he's rolling over her without really even understanding, without realizing it. Does it make sense about how the layers go together? Like the placement of the cards tells you about the relationship between the topics?
Robin, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Do reversals mean anything, or it's just that's not?
So that's a really good question. I'm glad you've asked. This is why I love it when people ask questions, because I'm like, out there, when people watch this replay, they're going to want to know. And I just don't think to answer them all. So yeah. Now, traditionally, Lenormand cards are not read in reverse at all. So most Lenormand readers in traditional reading don't read reversals. I personally love reversals. So I always read reversals myself. And actually my deck is a square deck. And so I only turn the reversals, I leave them reversed if they're actually upside down. And if they're facing either direction, like side to side, I turn them right side up. So I get 1/4 reversals in my deck. That's partly why I made a deck, by the way, because I wanted a square one to make 25% reversals. So if you do want to read reversals, and I love doing that, what I typically read is that if it's in reverse, that means that the card's energy is not expressing itself in a sort of clean, positive way. So I pay a special attention to positive cards that are in reverse. So like if the clover was reversed, that would mean that the guy is not seeing the small positives. You know, or if the ship were reversed, that would mean somebody's not embracing the journey. And so I always ask Spirit, what do I need to do if it's for me or for the questioner? What does the questioner need to do to turn this card right side up? So I let Spirit tell me where people need to engage in a more positive way with the energies of the card. Like if I got bear reversed, I would be like, okay, somebody isn't accepting their personal power here. I would suggest experimenting with reversed cards. And if you want to learn to read reversals, start out with them in just like a 3-card reading and practice the reversals until you get the hang of it. And then you can expand up into a higher number of cards. Yeah, good question. Any other questions before I keep going?
This set has 2 gentlemen and 2 ladies. There's one time that I got 2 gentlemen. So like, what do you do in that? And do you do an extra one or?
That's a good question. So if you're reading a type of reading where you only want 1 gentleman and 1 lady, like you're doing a relationship reading, then it's traditional to take out the extra gentleman and lady from the deck before you start reading. So it's perfectly fine to say, I really don't want to get 2 guys in this because that won't serve my purpose. But if you decide not to do that, you can interpret the 2 guys in 2 different ways. So first of all, maybe you're doing a reading for a same-sex couple and there are 2 men. And then what you want to do in advance is figure out which one is Tony and which one is going to be Jack. So Tony's going to be the guy in the blue shirt and Jack is the guy in the brown shirt, right? You give a specific designation for which guy is which. And you can do the same thing if you're like, well, I am doing a reading about my family. So this gentleman's going to represent my dad, and this one's going to represent my brother. So if you have multiple men, you can actually use the multiple men to identify which one those are. And you can choose it randomly, or you can just look at the picture and be like, this guy reminds me, like this is maybe the older gentleman in the gray wig, and I think the other one has dark hair, and so maybe he's a young gentleman. But the other thing you can do is you can read the gentleman as either actual people, like your boss, your boyfriend, your neighbor, your cat, you know, if you have a male cat, or you can read them in the sense of like masculine energy. So thinking, where do I need to be more take charge? Where do I need to be more yang? Where do I need to be more like making a plan and going out and getting what I want? And then what I would do, normally we don't read Lenormand symbolism, but very often the multiple gentlemen have kind of a different air about them. Like some of them are like more relaxed and others are more active or more vibrant. And then of course they look in different directions. So you can think about what they're calling your attention to in the deck itself. So you kind of have to either pick a symbolism if you're going to have them refer to specific people, or you can just open your mind and ask, why did Spirit bring up two men? Maybe there's a guy that in the picture that you haven't thought of. Maybe you need to act more like a guy, whatever that means to you in the situation. So there are always ways to distinguish between the two of them, and that's really about tapping into your intuition.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, any other questions? No. Okay, so I'm gonna back up a bit here, and I just want you guys, each of you, to think about what that question was that you wanted to practice on. What was that question that you wanted to practice on, if it was a relationship question or a career or some other question that you had? And ask which card in this spread seems to be the most, like the closest in meaning, or just calls your attention as you look at this. And then I want you to pick one card that's right next to it, above, below, or diagonal, and ask, open up your intuition and ask, what's the message in the way that these two cards go together? For me, it's just a little symbolic exercise. If you
Like
pick the,
pretend this is our spread.
Yep,
Okay.
that's exactly right. Pretending that this is a spread that was done for you. We're going to expand this up a little bit. Just pretend this is a spread for you. Because the thing is, we're connecting into our own intuition and our own connection with spirit. So we don't have to worry that these are like the wrong cards for somebody else. Your intuition and spirit's not going to give you the wrong message, no matter what your triggers are. I mean, your cards are. And then while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to check the waiting room and make sure I'm not missing anybody here. Nope, I'm good. Okay. All right. So I would love it if anybody would like to unmute and say which card you picked and what you think the message might be for you. Let us know what your signifier was and whether you're above or below, and just take a crack at an interpretation. I don't want to be just telling you things, right? I really want this to be a chance for you guys to practice. Anybody willing to volunteer? Is it scary to volunteer? Might be. All right, I will go first. So I'm going to say, let's talk about my relationship. I've been married. It'll be 24 years this year we've been married. So we have a strong marriage in the sense that it's been married for 24 years. But I don't always feel as close to my husband as I would like to feel. After 24 years, there's water under the bridge with the two of us. And I think we both have ways in which we've been hurt that we need to really work through. So I might start with my relationship. And the one that occurs to me here is to see that my husband is below on the diagonal, not really, like he's sort of focused on the relationship, but you can see that it's not exactly within his line of sight. And so I have a hunch that my husband is just focused on the small enjoyments of our day, like eating dinner together and watching television and working on our projects. But that maybe he's not really thinking about how we're relating as much. It's like, well, it's all good. everything's good. We have a beautiful dinner. We have a nice house. We're doing fine. And he's not really clued into how I'm relating to him. That's the message I'm getting from the ring on the surface. But then my husband is not super connected to that. That's the message that comes to me. And would it be helpful if I stopped the recording? Would it be easier to contribute and take a guess if I stop the recording?
It doesn't matter. I can go.
You want to go? Okay, thank you, Alexis. I really appreciate your willingness to give an example for the class. What are you thinking?
So for my relationship question, it should be the mountain, right? Because of all this obstacle, but for some reason I was drawn to the bear.
Ah, wonderful.
So I don't have the answer yet, but just looking at your chart for the bear, am I am I too domineering or too bossy?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. So you're asking if you're too domineering or too bossy relative to the guys that you're picking out or you're targeting?
Or like I'm so used to doing everything on my own, like I'm my own boss. I'm used to being alone. I'm used to solving problems on my own.
Yeah. I think that could be. So what could we say about the bear? And I really just want to congratulate you for saying this is what my eye was drawn to. I think that's where powerful readings come from, right? If we look at the bear, we know that your personal power might be an obstacle because it's next to the mountain here. What can we say about the way that the gentleman here is relating to the bear, right? The bear's in the foundation. That's the foundation, is your personal power. This mythical guy, he's above the bear. So what do we think his relationship to your personal power is? Saying that he's above it and your personal power is below that. Yeah, tap into your intuition and see what comes to you. No wrong answers.
You can overcome it.
Yeah, there might be some sense that maybe you're having trouble really like expressing your personal power in a way that the guy finds appealing. You know, he might be, the guys around you might not really understand you and respect your personal power. Right? They're just bowling over you or doing what they're doing or asking you out on dates, even if you don't like them. It feels like there should be some connection, but yet it almost seems like the guy is more important than your personal power. Like he's above that. The thing I see about your personal power down here is you can see that it is far away from the ring. So my hunch is that there's some degree to which, you know, all the good stuff is up here at the top of the reading, right? The ring, the clover, and the flowers. And I think you're having trouble seeing how your personal power actually relates to the good stuff.
Instead of an obstacle.
Right, exactly. Which is evident in the question you asked. Is my power the problem? I'm too bossy. I'm too domineering. And I think it's hard for you to see how does being a strong and powerful woman, which you totally are, actually like result in a positive relationship. Like you haven't connected your personal power to what you're like the relationship that you're looking for. And we get that, right? We're surrounded by messages, mostly from the past generation, but even from the current generation. Guys don't like powerful women. The guy wants to wear the pants in the family. You know, well, if you do too much, the guy will feel that you're emasculating him. And that, you know, old school advice is like, well, let your husband feel like he's always right. You know, it's hard to emancipate yourself from the sense that being too bossy and dominating is an obstacle. Now, being bossy and dominating is not necessarily the route to a healthy relationship. But can you figure out a way to make friends with your personal power so that it isn't bossy and dominating, so that actually it solidifies a healthy relationship instead of feeling like it's an obstacle. And this is part of what makes the 9-card reading so cool, is that the distance between the topics tells you how they are or aren't going together. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if we were going to look at solutions, that would be great, right? We don't want to just identify the problem. What keywords come to your mind, or you can look at my page for the stork, which is obviously right next to your bear. The bear's facing the stork here and the stork's facing the bear. So there's an obvious connection between these two cards.
Transition, something new coming in, transformation, baby cycles.
Yeah. So maybe not the baby quite yet. You know, storks are traditionally symbols of babies, but that's probably not what we're looking at least not at the moment. But something new coming in, a
Yeah, I like
transformation.
that.
How could you bring in something new with regard to the way you see your personal power? What could you transform in the way that you see it, or the way that you exercise it, or the way that you see it contributing to a solid relationship?
So be more protective instead of being domineering.
Yeah, that's a great start, right? Definitely write that down. And then you could ask a follow-up question. What could you protect? Sometimes we're dominating because we think dominating others will protect ourselves. But as you see, there's a difference between what is it that would need to be protected?
For me or for the other person?
Or for the relationship, right? That's good questions. And you can, you know, obviously we're going to come back later. You can think about this after the class. What am I protecting in the other person? What am I protecting for myself? And how am I protecting actually a strong relationship, right? That's the real key, is to get this personal power thing so that it's more integrated into the idea of a relationship. Maybe you need to protect honest communication. Maybe you need to protect making your partner feel valued, even though you're very strong, that your personal power doesn't undermine his value or his power.
And other people's boundary too.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, you're doing amazing, but I hope this is giving you guys an example of how you can use the cards as an intuitive, like, prod to what is my problem, what is my challenge, and what is my solution.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're totally welcome. Okay, I'm going to go to a few more cool things you can do with the 9-card reading, and then we will look at somebody else's question if you guys like. Okay, so we talked about the horizontal ones, right? These are the horizontal rows, and now we're going to read this vertically. So I like to read this. The left column is the beginning. Where did this situation start? The middle column is kind of like, where are we now? And then the right column is like, where is this headed? So it is a little bit of a past, present, future, but it's not necessarily like we're predicting the future of what will happen. Although if you're good at future predictions, you might be able to do this. It's more like, how did we get here? What are we building on? What are we experiencing at the moment? And then what are like the solutions, or what's the positive path going forward? So what we would say here is that at the beginning, this started off as a really positive relationship. So because our 2 positive cards are in this first row, it was probably a very strong relationship. There was a lot of good going on. And I would say that with the stork here too, this was a relationship that probably helped both of these people to transform, to grow, to bring new things and new ideas into their lives. So there was a lot of like freshness kind of in newness. Plus there were probably a lot of just daily positive experiences with this couple really starting out. Okay, anybody willing to hazard a guess at what we might know from the middle column? And you're welcome to use some of this bear symbolism and the gentleman symbolism that Alexis and I were talking about. Any guesses on what the middle column says about kind of where we are now in this relationship? So like on the surface right now, the relationship looks What are some keywords for flowers? And if somebody's typing things in the chat, somebody should feel free to read those to me. I just can't see them. So I would say that it looks good on the surface right now. Right now, things look pretty good on the surface. Generally speaking, what we're really talking about at the moment is that there's this problem with the guy being maybe too powerful and bowling over the woman, even though it might be sort of unconscious. He might not be doing it on purpose. But right now, this relationship is probably too much about what the guy wants, and he's the focus at the moment. And then if I looked at the right column, I'm looking at, this is where we're headed. So I would say that the lady is going to have to step up. She's going to have to stop being all about this superficial stuff, right? That's from the last reading. She's going to have to step up and probably do some transforming of her own. She's got her own journey. And I say journey because we have the ship here. So the ship can be a literal journey, like you're moving someplace or you're traveling or you're living in a different country. But it also can represent sort of your personal journey. So I think the lady's got to stop living in the past with all of this like positivity from earlier in the relationship. And she's got to be like, all right, I got to step up. And what kind of journey is it? Well, it's a journey to overcome this obstacle. We know the obstacle is probably related to personal power. And it may be that obstacle might be partly that the woman is resisting her journey. She doesn't want to grow. She's not willing to move forward. She is stuck in the past. So she's going to have to really like, okay, time for me to be, digging deep, being willing to be different, confronting my own obstacle. I am not a fatalistic reader, so I would not read this as, oh, big problems are coming in your relationship. Oh, this means your relationship's going to be really an obstacle to you. Like, I don't read that way because that's not the inspiration Spirit gives me. I read it as, okay, it's probably going to be some challenges going forward. But these are challenges. You can see the lady is on top of it, literally. Lady's on top of it. And the point of the lady is not to focus on the obstacle. It's to focus on her journey. And then the journey will take care of the obstacles. So it's not like bad things ahead. Other Lenormands are famous for like doomsday advice. So other readers may read it that way and they're welcome to. But it's more like you can succeed, because I think Spirit always gives us a chance to succeed. But you're going to have to do it by not shying away from the hard stuff and stop lamenting your past positivity and start really confronting the fact that you need to transform. Do you have any questions about how I did that, where that interpretation came from? Okay. All right. So as we're looking at this, you can see that just the 9 cards themselves are giving us all different kinds of ways to interpret this. We can start with the signifier. We can look at the cards that are next to it. We can look at the superficial, the client experience, and the foundation. And then we can do a past, present, future thing. One thing I would say if I were reading this for a client, again, I'm always thinking about my client's emotional experience, is I would say, don't give in to feelings of fear, right? The overall progression here is from this sort of very sunny past to like an okay, good present to a like, okay, things are going to get hard future. And so I would think about my client's mindset and be like, but just don't give up hope. This doesn't mean that your marriage is on the rocks and you guys will get divorced and he's the wrong guy for you and that everything will happen. It does, however, mean that the guy might be a little bit focused on the past, right? He's looking to the left, and it might be up to the lady to be charting this course because she's the one who's facing to the right towards the future. But you would want to reassure your client and make sure that she's not like that you're working on that internal unease that we identified at the beginning of things. So this is also part of what makes a good reader, is the ability to use the information in the cards to help the client literally just feel better about their situation, because people come back when you help them feel better about their situation. All right, any questions about that? Okay, so I think I've got one more Lenormand technique before we get on to how this works in the Grand Tableau. How are you guys feeling? Is this like a right amount of information? Are you up for another technique for the 9 cards? Or I want to make sure I'm not overwhelming people.
We can continue.
Do you? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
And then someone also typed in the chat and said yes.
Yes, continue. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so I love knighting. I love knighting because I love chess. And actually somebody just did a reading for me today about chess. So it's kind of funny that this is coming up. But this is also a great way to bring out subtle or hidden influences. So we've talked about how to read the cards that are right next to each other, right? Like the bear and the stork facing each other, probably transformation and how you think about your personal power. So you guys might know in chess, the knight moves over 2 and up or down 1, or over 1 and down 2. That's the movement of the knight piece. And so we're going to do something similar to that with our important cards in this reading. So let's say I was going to ask myself, what are some of the deep things that the lady can access for her own good? Like, we know she's up at the surface, she's thinking about all the superficial stuff, but if we thought about her deeper resources, what could we find? And so what we would do is we would go over 2 and down 1. And we would see that actually, you know, the gentleman is focused on all this positive stuff. Clover is like small daily, you know, like pleasures, or like finding a 4-leaf clover. You're like, oh, this is not, you know, thousands of dollars, but it made me happy. It was very positive. It seems like the lady maybe is the source of a lot of that goodness. And part of the reason that she and the gentleman are not connecting, maybe that he's just focused on how great everything is with her. He thinks she's wonderful. He thinks she's amazing. And he's missing this obstacle that she's seeing down at the bottom of this relationship. But, you know, it's not all like he's distracted by work or he's distracted by the kids. Actually, she's the source of this good that he's thinking about. And so she could be reassured here that it may feel like they're not really connecting, but that he really is into her. Like, he really sees that she's a positive thing in his life. And then we would knight the other way, and we would go down 2 and over 1 and see, well, when we looked at the cards superficially, the lady maybe wasn't accessing her personal power very well, right? She's way at the top, power's down at the bottom. There's not a lot of connection between the two. But actually, when we knight them, we're like, oh, who's the one with the power in this relationship? You know, maybe the guy is just using his power kind of randomly because he's just, you know, doing whatever he does. But the lady really has power if she could figure out how to use it. So you could reassure her that, you know what, this isn't some relationship that's just like sailing along without you and it's going to hit the rocks. Like, you actually have the power to make a difference here. You are a source of goodness in this guy's life, and you might need to exercise your personal power better and do the transformation. But it's not like you're the victim of forces that are outside of your control. And so I just chose the example because knighting the signifier is always a really good thing to do. But you could knight any of the cards in this to figure out more detail about kind of the subtle influences that are at play in that topic. Does anybody have any questions about how this knighting thing worked?
This is much cooler than the one I was going to ask you. But some people do the diagonal and the circle reading.
Yes, so you can totally do the diagonal and the circle, and I just decided that I would leave those until the next time I discuss 9 cards. I didn't want to do every 9 card technique because I wanted to give people a few techniques and then let you guys go and play with it and then come back and tell me what you did. But we are going to do a 9 card follow-up. We will get to the diagonal and the cross and the circle, all those sorts of things.
But this is much cooler though, honestly.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. Okay. Anybody else have a question about how the knighting things works? Because we're about to practice. Okay. So it's over 2 and down 1, and or over 1 and down 2, or up 2. Okay. So I'm going to take
is it any direction?
Yes, it is. So if you're doing a grand tableau and it went off in different directions, yeah, any direction. It's just you move 2 in one direction and then 1 90 degrees. Or 1 in one direction and then 2 90 degrees.
Okay.
Yeah, any direction.
Right. How are we choosing which card moves?
So we're really good question. And what we're doing is we're asking ourselves about the specific topic of the card. So like if, let's say we were doing this reading, I did this reading for a lady. So since she's the subject of the card and she's the one who's asking me the question, of course I want to give her more information about what her potential is. But let's say I wanted to figure out more about this obstacle. What are the obstacles in this? What can I tell this lady, myself, whoever I'm reading for, about the nature of this obstacle and how it manifests. So then I would use the mountain card because that's our obstacle. So I would go, can anybody tell me what's one of the cards, 2 cards that the mountain card knights to? All right, if I went up 2, now I can't go to the right because there isn't a card. So I went up 2, and then over to the left, I get to flowers. What's the other card that the mountain will knight to in this read? I'd have to go this way. And then I would arrive at what? That's right, the clover.
Over.
Yeah. So isn't that odd, right? That the negative card here, the challenge card, knights to both of the positive cards. So what could we tell the lady about the nature of this challenge? Is this like a horrible challenge where doomsday is coming for your relationship?
No, it's a growth.
Probably. She's got double goodnesses coming from this challenge. Absolutely. So what are some of the good things that we could tell her are probably going to come out of surmounting this challenge, right? What do flowers and clover symbolize? Feel free to look on my little PDF if you want some keywords. What are the good things that will probably come out of this? And obviously open to your intuition, right? There's no right or wrong answers here.
Appreciation from her husband.
Yeah, right? The guy doesn't look like he's terribly well situated to solve this problem, right? He's facing the opposite direction. He's not in the same row, you know, the personal power thing really isn't about him, it's about her. Yeah, I think the husband would be really happy if she could work on this. Yeah. What about seeing the obstacle as a gift? What is it about this flowers card that says this obstacle is maybe actually a gift for this relationship and not really a barrier to it? Right? Imagine how this lady feels if the husband's ever given her flowers. Well, this gift is kind of like flowers from spirit, this obstacle. And we can even think of that, right? Even just in the symbolism of this card, right? Mountain. Well, the mountain is hard. Climbing a mountain is difficult. It can be dangerous and scary. It takes skill. It's not accomplished overnight. But once you get to the top, you have an amazing view. You have a whole new perspective. You have a lot of strengths that you developed through all the hard work on the way. And we can see that both of these causative cards that it knights to are both right next to the relationship. So I would say actually that far from being a problem, this obstacle is actually really like a boon. It's a gift for this relationship. It's something that's going to help the relationship grow much stronger. I wouldn't think that this lady has anything to be worried about in this relationship, assuming that she dives into her journey and actually works on this obstacle and doesn't just let it sit at the bottom and fester and worry about it and get insecure. But like handled properly, the obstacle could be great. Yep.
I was thinking with the clovers and the flowers, just from looking at them, that there's growth, you know, that is coming, because the flowers and clovers both are about, they're living and they're about like transformation, but growth in a way that is good. It's like reaching up towards the sun and grabbing onto something that's light.
Yes.
Or moving towards that.
Right. You guys are so talented. Yay. So you can see why that super simple symbolism of Lenormand is so powerful. Because, you know, I could ask my 8-year-old niece what a clover is a symbol of, and she would say good luck. You know, I could ask her, do you like getting flowers? And she would say, yes, flowers are pretty. And because of that, you guys have so much like leftover brain power to consult your intuition and be like, what is this the symbol of? What is this telling me? Yeah, absolutely. Great job. Perfect. What could we figure out about the transformation? If we wanted to know more about how this lady is going to have to transform in order to start harnessing her power, what card would we be looking at for the transformation? You guys are doing so great answering my questions. I really appreciate your willingness to unmute or type things in the chat.
I would say the bear,
Mm-hmm.
because bears are known to hibernate and then come out and fully
Yeah.
charged.
Perfect. Yeah, so you could totally use the bear for that. So what cards does the bear knight to?
Would it be the ring?
Yep, exactly, right? Because we, in both directions, we can go over 1 and up 2 to the ring. And then what's the other card that the bear knights to? If we go the other direction.
Lady.
A lady, exactly, up to the right. Exactly. So what kind of personal power are we talking about here? How could this person start thinking about personal power in a more transformative and positive way? Personal power in the context of the ring and of the lady. Types of power is that? What are the qualities of that power? Again, just open to your intuition, take a moment, see what comes
Marriage,
to you.
stable relationship.
Yeah. Maybe far from being an obstacle in this relationship, this power is actually the power to stabilize it. Instead of feeling like the power is overbearing or it's too bossy or dominating, this lady could be like, you know what? This makes me powerful to actually create a relationship that could last. Perfect. If we knight the bear, the power to the lady, obviously it's the lady's power. That's the concrete meaning. But we could also think about, what does it mean to have personal power in a feminine sort of way? You know, maybe this isn't the traditional like strength to lift heavy boxes while moving power, or the strength to like dominate others so that people do your will, traditional power.
So it's like receiving and give and take compromises.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be a great way to be thinking of this power. And of course, like what relationship wouldn't benefit from like the strength to receive and give and take, right? That would be amazing. Or we could think of other traditional, and I'm not saying this is stereotypical, but just traditional things that women are associated with, like being a good listener, being good at dealing with their emotions. We could think of, I'd like to think of the lady card as a yin sort of energy, going with the flow, embracing the unknown, not trying to control everything, maybe nurturing power rather than like, you know, directing power, that sort of stuff. So we're just thinking, how does this lady look like she would exercise power? You know, to me, she looks very sort of like calm and peaceful. So I could say maybe it's the power to diffuse arguments, not sweep them under the rug, but, you know, like not react emotionally so that you can get to the bottom of what the real problem is and not just say things that you then can't take back. I hope you guys are seeing. I always get so excited when we unearth all these insights. It's just 9 little cards, but we've got a lot of information from this. There are lots of problem-solving approaches. I always leave my 9 card readings up for several days because I find that when I come back and look at the other cards, then I just get more intuitive hits on what I can do. Yeah. Anybody have anything else they want to say about what type of power this is or how people could transform figuring it out?
I see that her power is going to benefit her to be more assertive and not be so ladylike, because that's her surface. Her surface, she's very dainty and peaceful, regal, and that inner bear, she needs to be more assertive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a great way to do that. And this is the kind of thing that as you tap into the energy of the person you're reading for, if that's you or if that's somebody else, right? You might be able to pick up on energies from them that you can see that this person is kind of, you know, keeping very small and very like not like asserting a lot of power, apologizing for herself, maybe in terms of how she interacts with you. And that might clue you in that maybe she is somebody who just needs to stand up for herself more. Or it might be the opposite of that. You might be looking at her or you, if it's you, and thinking, you know what, I just tend to just jump in. I know that about myself. I tend to dominate others because that's what I was taught was going to make me successful, you know, in the man's world or something. I probably need to become more like this lady and dial it back. So that's the kind of thing where, depending on how you want to read it and how well you know your reader or what you can pick up from them, you might be able to just ask, do you feel like you're somebody who really should exercise your power more? Or are you somebody who tends to exercise it very quickly, but you don't always get you don't always get a response that feels good to you. And you need to learn to have a more receptive power rather than a more dominating power. And again, I think that's one of the things that really makes a good reading as opposed to just an okay reading is your ability to tailor it for the person in front of you, what you're picking up for them. And then of course you have to know yourself, right? If you're reading for you. Oh, it's another one of those set more boundaries readings. I get those a lot. If this were me, I would definitely be the lady who had to amp up my power for sure. Yeah. Great. Okay. Any other questions about the 9-card reading or how they work? Or we could do another sample, like we could ask a question about what is the journey the lady is on, or you know, we could knight the stork and think more about what this transformation is going to be. We could also move on to doing this in a Grand Tableau. Any other 9-card questions at the moment? Okay, so I'm going to pause the replay for just a second here. And all right, so we are back up now. We're going to be looking at the Grand Tableau. So I've got a Grand Tableau that I put together for this, which we're going to use. And then you are welcome, if you're following along with this at home, to deal out your own Grand Tableau or to follow along with mine. So the Grand Tableau is basically the Lenormand term for dealing out all the cards. That's what that means. And this is something that goes back to the very first published Lenormand deck, including the directions from Marie Lenormand's like fictitious nephew Philippe, who's the one who originally sort of gave the Lenormand directions. Lenormand cards were not used by her. They came along after her, but they just stole her name because she was a famous psychic. So this is the traditional way to deal out the Grand Tableau, which is, oops, I don't have it. It's basically 4 rows of 8 plus 4 cards at the bottom. And that's a total of 36 cards. The 4 cards at the bottom are often taken to be signifiers of like the main themes of the reading. They have a special place. So you can use them for some special techniques, which we'll get to at a different date. However, you can deal out, there are 36 cards. So you can deal out 4 rows of 9. You can deal out a 6x6 grid. So you can experiment with whatever works for you, depending on your level of space and all that kind of stuff. I like the 4 at the bottom as sort of overall themes. And there are about 1 million Grand Tableau techniques. And if this class continues, we will get to many more of them. But today, what I wanted to talk about is the 9-card reading in the Grand Tableau. So one of the things about the Grand Tableau that's useful is that you don't have to have a specific question. You don't have to use a signifier because every card is going to end up somewhere in the reading. So you don't have to say, oh, this is about relationships, so I'm going to choose the ring. You can just deal it out and figure out where the ring ends up. Now, I will say that the traditional Lenormand deck has 36 different cards, but it has 2 ladies and 2 gentlemen. So if you want to deal out a traditional Grand Tableau with a traditional deck, then you traditionally remove one of the ladies and one of the gentlemen before you start. But you can simply add them in and consider them to be different incarnations of masculine and feminine energy. Or if you're reading for somebody who has more than one man or more than one woman in her life, you know, you could read for a woman and her mom and leave them both into the deck and just decide it ahead of time which card is the woman that you're reading for, and which card is her mother, which card is her dad, and which card is her brother, which card is her boss, and which card is her uncle, like all that sort of stuff. So you can make those decisions ahead of time if you decide you want to do that. And so the way that we do that is we investigate the life area by card topic. So let's say we deal out all the cards and then we're like, I wonder what's going on with my health. Now, you know what? I think I might do this. Marjorie, since you joined us, I'm just going to add into the chat. I have a, oops. Can you guys hear me still? Hello?
Yes.
Did you lose me? You're still here. Okay. I'm just typing into the chat the link to my PDF the link to my PDF, again, for people who want to take a look at the list of keywords, because we're about to be using those. And I'm also typing in my payment information if you would like to contribute $5 for this class. If you don't want to contribute $5, and maybe you can just contribute a testimonial at the end, that would also be okay. Okay, so anyway, but if you want to take a look at the keyword list, there it is in the chat again. And back up. So does anybody know which card is we typically use for health readings? If you're thinking about health or sometimes personal growth, what's a Lenormand card that's good for that traditionally?
Oh, is it the tree?
It's the tree, exactly, right. So you're like, I wonder what's going on with my health, or personal growth is also for the tree. Tree also is sometimes used for ancestors. So if you're doing ancestral work, you can use your Lenormand deck for that with a tree. So what you do is hunt around for the tree. Where is the tree in your Grand Tableau, right? You shuffled, you dealt it out. It's got to be in here someplace. And in this case, I hope you guys can see, I found the tree right in our center. And then you can see that there is a whole 9-card reading right around it. This is one of the reasons that people don't do Grand Tableaus like every day for themselves, because there's so much information that you're able to get. So we could do an entire 9-card reading just about health by sticking our tree at the center. Now, when you use this technique, often your signifier ends up in the middle, because in this case, we had cards all around it. So we would do our 9-card reading. We put our tree at the heart. We could see that this person has a couple negative cards when it comes to their health. So they've got the coffin, which is about endings, and the cross, which is also about endings. And then like we have the birds here. The birds is often about excessive communication, gossip, or chatter. So I would say that this person might have like a lot of ideas about their health, but maybe not know exactly which direction to go in, because that being right next to the tree. Anyway, so we can come back and look at this reading if people are interested in a health reading. But you might be like, I wonder about my job. And then we would look at fox. And then we would move this ring down and look at the fox 9-card spread. Now, sometimes you might want to look at something that isn't in the middle enough to actually give you 9 cards at the center. So if I wanted to look at abundance, financial abundance is typically the fish. That's in the upper left here. And so that would then go with a 9-card reading all the way at the edge. We wouldn't really be able to put that at the center, but you could still do a 9-card reading knowing that fish was kind of the beginning here, but it looks like we're coming to some sort of end with the scythe. And then we have mice next to fish. So I would say that financial abundance is not necessarily what's coming in this person's future if we read it horizontally. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be impoverished and lose their house and everything like that, but they may be switching from one financial situation to another. Maybe the way that they're currently making money is going away and they're going to have to be thinking about something different, or a job change, or something like that. So anyway, so the cool thing is once you know the list of signifiers, you can then wander around the tableau and see which signifier is a topic you might be interested in figuring out. So one way to do that is to just be intuitive and be like, how about my job? Let's look at fox. Oh, about my health? Let's look at tree. And that's a perfectly valuable and valid way to read these. But there's another method that I think that can also work out well, which is to say, what is going well in my life? This is good if you're like feeling discouraged, or you're kind of sad, or you're like, oh man, I feel depressed about something. Find like the most positive card in the deck, or a concentration of positive cards. So like here, for example, we have this little concentration. You guys can now see that 9-card reading I was showing you was actually part of this Grand Tableau. We've got a bunch of positive cards. We've got the gift and, the flowers and the clover, which are both very positive. The ring is a positive card of commitment. And so I would just be looking at this area of the Grand Tableau, thinking, what else is around here? Maybe my relationship with the ring is really a source of goodness in my life right now, or maybe the guy that I'm with is somebody I could get more positive energy out. Maybe I'm not really paying attention to him because I'm focused on problems, but he actually could be really positive for me. So look for kind of concentrations of positive stuff and see what can I really be taking energy or encouragement from. And then of course you can do the flip side. you can also be like, what's not going so well in my life? Well, I've got the scythe, which is typically negative. I've got the mice, which is typically negative. I've got the whip, which is also kind of negative. All right, maybe this child, maybe that's the one that things really aren't going so well. Now, it might be your inner child. It might be an actual child. It might be that you're squashing your inner child, or you're not having enough creativity, or there's not enough play in your life. But you can kind of let your eyes wander around, because this helps you evaluate the positive things in life at the moment, and then maybe the things that aren't going so well. And depending on whether you're like, this is a troubleshooting reading and I want to see what's not going well, or whether this is a like, I need some encouragement reading and I want to see what is going so well, you can use the Grand Tableau and this 9-card technique to dive more deeply into the problem areas that need work, or the encouragement areas where you need to be like more grateful, or seeing more positive things in your life. Okay, any questions about those two methods, picking a signifier versus looking for concentrations of positive or negative cards? No questions. Okay, perfect. So I would love it if anybody wants to do a sample reading, if there's a question you're willing to have on the recording. To talk about health, we could do health, we could do friendship, that's the dog, we could do finances, we could do career. And if people aren't willing to have one on recording, then I'm happy to do one off the recording if that would be more personally comfortable. Anybody have a sample topic they'd like to investigate with this reading?
I have one.
Yes, what is it?
So, my question is, why do I find it difficult to focus on my career?
Ooh, excellent question. Okay. So what kind of career do you have?
So I have a beauty business, remember?
Okay. And are you you're running it out of your home, or is it that you work for a large organization?
No, I have my own salon.
Your own salon. And I know the answer to this, by the way, but I just, for the purposes.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I remember, but I just wanted to have that on here so that we would know like the decision-making process. Okay. So, and then the last question is, because we're trying to figure out which signifier we should use. So the last question is, do you feel like the challenges really are because there's something in you that makes it hard to focus, or is the problem from your perspective with the business itself?
Me, definitely me.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean great because that was great. I meant great because now I understand better what you need to work on. Okay, so I would say that the card we should focus on then is the fox. And the reason I asked the questions I did is that large businesses and corporations are typically symbolized by the tower. So if you're like, oh, I work for like a beauty school or something like that, that would probably be the tower. Actually, I think what I'm going to do, sorry, you guys can see how I make my presentations. I'm going to blow this up a bit here so that we can see the card bigger. So if you worked for a big organization or like a big salon, then we would be looking at the tower. Home-based businesses or small like mom and pop kind of businesses are typically symbolized by the house. So like if you're like, I work out of my home and it's just me, then that would be a house. But who you are as a worker is fox. So I'm going to do the fox here. And so can you see that I'm just adjusting this so that the fox is now at the beginning?
So you said we're not doing the lower 4, right?
Well, so if I were doing a Grand Tableau reading with the lower 4, like the overall themes, then we would look at the lower 4 and I would read those. But again, I said, I think we're going to leave that for another day. Today, we're doing 9-card readings. And so that's what I'm going to focus on.
Angelica, do you have staff?
No, it's just me.
Okay.
Yep. So, and that's why I asked whether I thought, like, if you thought the problem was the business, I would be focusing on the house, although it is actually the house and the tower are both in this reading here just because of the way the cards fell. Okay. So I just wanted to make them a little bit bigger so that we can all see them here. There we go. I love my slides. Okay, so you've specifically stated that you think there's a problem, right? Because you're not focused enough, whatever that is. So here you are at the middle. This is the fox, which is you as a worker and your own business. what negative cards do we have in this Grand Tableau, in this 9-card reading? Do you see negative cards here? And if you're not sure, I can point it out, or you can check on my PDF. In fact, maybe we should do that. Check on, oh, I will say, by the way, that this birch rod is the same as the whip. I do mention that. Birch rod was like an old-fashioned switch, but in modern decks, this is often called the whip.
So the bird is an challenge.
Right, the birds can be challenging. And then also, the whip is often a challenging card itself. Maybe I'll pick a couple of pluses here. Oops. So I appreciate you guys being patient with me while I rearrange these slides. I wasn't really planning to do this, but I think it's valuable. So we have some challenging cards here with the birds, and then the whip can be challenging. Good. And then we have a couple of traditionally very positive cards as well. What are some of the positive cards we have here? You guys are so good. I appreciate your willingness to do the work.
I think the star is a good card, right?
Yep, it is. And then
A heart.
heart, exactly. So for those of you guys who didn't see how we did our 9-card reading at the beginning of all of this, one good thing to do is just to map out where are the positive ones and where are the negative ones, so that you can see kind of relative to this. And I would say, interestingly enough, that I'm going to say that the child is positive here too, or at least it could be. Well, maybe not. I might think about that since it's next to the birds, might not be. Okay, so right, these are the positive cards, and we've got a couple of challenging cards here too. So it looks to me like if we're reading on the surface, on the one hand, the stars is like, you know, this is a dream for you. Running this business is part of your goals. But what can we say about what your challenge might be as far as why it's hard for you to focus? What do the birds tell us about the potential challenge here?
Birds are known to gossip almost, always in flight.
Yeah, not settling down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in Lenormand, the birds are especially symbolic of chatter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think of all the birds constantly chirping in the trees. So the birds can be a symbol of having like a lot of ideas, lacking a coherent direction, or maybe even too many outside opinions that might be inside your own mind. Or it might be that you're like getting too much advice, or that everybody and your brother has some idea about what you should be doing. And you're kind of like looking around at everything that's going on with them. Now, this is challenging here because on this upper row, we have some positive stuff in our past, but then looking towards where you're headed, it's maybe not looking so good. Does that resonate with you, that like this all started off as something you were excited about that really seemed like it was heading in a good direction, and now you're like, ooh, challenges have come up.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So you also read this like a 3-card spread in a way?
Well, that's the past, present, future thing.
Right.
This is the past where you're building on, here where you are in the present. This is what you're looking towards.
You're right.
What you're kind of heading towards. Yeah. So yeah, you can read it. It's a 3-card right across. I'm kind of zipping around. Maybe I shouldn't do that. I probably shouldn't do that. Okay, let's back up. So if we're looking at our vertical, we did the horizontal. This was the surface. So on the surface, it started out, it's good, but there's also this challenge of having a lot of ideas or too many outside opinions, whatever that might be. Where are you in this middle row? The birch rod. Yeah, you're the fox here. Now your challenge, this birch rod, which is the same as the whip, right? I said that was about sex. Maybe that doesn't apply here, although it might. But it also might be about getting stuck in a rut, having old habits or patterns that are hard to break. You know, this feeling like flogged, like you're just having to do the same thing over again. That's not very pleasant.
Right.
And then the tower is a symbol of security, but also it can be somewhat inflexible. So what do these 3 cards, what can they tell us about your current experience in your business and what's working well for you and maybe what's not working so well?
What is it, tower?
Mhm.
You said that signifies a house?
Yeah, so typically it's like a strong tower. So it can be a place of security.
Right, so that would be, I do feel security as, it's, the building itself is family owned, so I do have that comfort.
Perfect. Okay, so that's a positive. Sorry, I realize now this is kind of small, could be bigger. Yeah, exactly. And what's the challenge that you're experiencing right now? What is this birch rod a symbol of for you?
Mm,
The whip, remember?
I mean, it could mean relationships, but I really don't think it does.
Mhm. So the whip is typically a symbol of like a cycle or a habit or a pattern it's hard to break.
Yes. I
Yeah.
usually,
Do you have a
I'm
thought? Is your
either, usually I'm either like all in, or then I take a break, and then I'm all in, and then I go back, you know?
Uh-huh. So you have to ask yourself, okay, I asked the question, what was the challenge? Why am I having trouble focusing, right? We've identified one, which is that there may be too many ideas or too many outside opinions. But here's another challenge, the challenge for where you are. And then you would ask yourself, you open to your intuition and your connection with spirit, what rut am I stuck in that I need to get out of? What's my habit or practice that I need to change? And maybe it's that. Maybe it's that you get all in, go all in, and you burn yourself out, and then you have to stop completely.
On a personal level, I think it's too comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've gotten stuck in some sort of like secure thing, but it's
Right.
not exciting or interesting anymore.
Yeah.
It's not really lighting up your passion.
It does, and then it doesn't. It does, and then it doesn't.
Yeah. So if we look at the bottom, right, this sounds like we should really be thinking about the foundation then, now that we know part of what the problem is. Looking at these cards along the bottom here, the heart's a very positive card about, and it can be about relationships, but it's really about what you're passionate about, what you love. The house represents actually a house, but it also can represent kind of keeping things close to home or feeling like family. And then the moon has to do with your emotions, either positive or negative. Good emotions, but also like, getting an emotional turmoil or having other emotions that might be derailing you. So if we looked at this as the foundation here, what do you think is causing this experience of being all in and then stopping and being all in and then stopping?
Outside sources. It's kind of, yeah.
Are they outside sources? Which of these cards make you think about outside sources?
Both of them.
The moon and the house and the heart?
Yes, because I mean, if you're emotionally attached to something or someone, and if it's not stable, you're not stable.
Yeah. So that might connect up to the birds. Can we see, by the way, that the house here is knighting up to the birds? Right, up 2 and over 1.
Right.
So that means that this house, this family, might be the source of all of these conflicting ideas, or of the chatter, or of the opinions. It may be that those are other people's opinions. And I would also knight the house. What's the other card that the house knights to? If we go to the right, birds, right, exactly. So this is something that you can ask yourself, right? And this is when we do readings, we don't want to assume things about people. So you can decide if this is pertinent to you. Is there some sense where your star, like your goal or your guiding dream, is really to please your family? And not just to enjoy your business or to be a financial success? Like, is there some sort of like, but I sort of feel like my family has to like it, or I have to get along with them, or I have to pay them rent, or whatever it is, because the business is enmeshed with your family?
I started it for myself,
Mm-hmm.
but now that there's more challenges, I do feel like I have priority, or I need to prioritize what my family needs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe as a supporter,
Right.
financially.
Yeah. So that might be, so that you should ask yourself, right? Is that affecting my ability to focus on the business? Because now there are these competing demands or goals.
Right. It's like almost giving me cold feet in a sort of way.
Yeah. And that's not too surprising. I mean, the star here is right next to child. So this could be children in your family if you have children. Or it
I have
could be,
one.
yeah, it could be your inner child, which you can see your inner child is kind of stuck here between this dream you have for the business. And
I
then
was
everybody
going
else
to
is
ask
like,
the image above, for instance, the image above the child, is that connected or?
So this is another thing I plan to do yet another on Lenormand cards on this aspect at some point. So Lenormand cards, traditionally, each card is associated with a playing card. And this is the Jack of Spades right here. So this young man is the Jack, and then obviously there's a spade. Like the house card, this is the King of Hearts. And then the other
Okay.
cards count up. So like this Tower card is associated with the Six of Spades. And it is possible to also read those. So I didn't do a clinic on how to read those today, but you can actually do it. And you can also, of course, simply use them from a numerological or symbolic standpoint if your intuition tells you it's important. So like you could say, well, this little child is looking out at the viewer, like, you know, longing for to be something different because in her mind, she has this idealized sense of herself as a prince or princess. Right? Like,
Okay.
oh, I wish I were dressed in these beautiful clothes, looking so gorgeous and dapper and handsome. That's just a symbolic reading. That has nothing to do with Lenormand symbolism per se. It's just like the way that they've chosen this particular painting. So you can read these upper inserts if they call to you. And at some point I'll do a clinic on a class on how to do that.
Okay.
Yep. In general, spades represent hard work. So this is the work of what the child's work in this case is kind of like, is it the work to play? Is it the work to grow? Is it the work to learn? Is it the work to be happy? And a Jack is kind of like a page in tarot, where you're kind of like at the beginning stage, right? It's a young person who's still growing.
Right.
So it's like listening to your inner child, or perhaps your child, if you feel like you have to take care of your child, and think, what is the work I'm doing that's really going to help in this situation? The work is the spade. That's really going to help me focus. Because the problem we have as business owners is that if we're trying to please our family with our business, but then that means we can't focus on the business, and then the business is not so successful, we don't end up pleasing our family.
Right.
It's almost like by putting them first at the expense of your business, then the business suffers, and then it doesn't actually achieve the goal that they wanted us to achieve in the first place. It's like, I was talking to a client, and I was like, yeah, you take mom and dad's advice, and you're like, okay, I took your advice, and now I'm miserable just like you wanted. And they're like, well, I didn't want you to be miserable. And it's like, oh yeah, but you gave me that advice, and I know you really wanted me to take it. But, you know, I could never be happy with that advice because I have a different personality. And they're like, but we just wanted you to take our advice, but not be miserable. But they didn't realize that you would inevitably be miserable taking their advice because you're not them.
Mm-hmm.
Or because they were advising you according to their goals, but not your goals. So there may be some separation here. We could look at just the arrangement and say that your childlike nature, knowing how you need to learn and grow, you've got to separate these goals from these opinions. Right? You've got to take a stand and be like, no, this is what's going to actually help me build this business. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Do you want to investigate any of the other cards here, or we can try the knighting technique on your emotions and figure out what those are all about? We could investigate the heart, which is the most positive card here. That would be a useful thing to do. Or do you feel like you've gotten enough? I'm happy to.
Can we dissect the moon? And does it correlate somehow in some way, shape, or form with the stars?
Well, the fact that they're both in the same vertical column. Remember what the vertical column represented? This one?
Beginning.
Yeah. So I would say at the beginning of this, what could we say about the correlation between the moon and the stars?
There was a lot of passion into my work.
Mm-hmm.
Passion getting it started.
That's right. So I would say at the beginning, it's more of sense that your emotions and your goals were aligned. And that was kind of how this whole thing got going. But as we move over to the right, looking at the future of your business, What do we need to move from? Like move from the moon to the heart. Exactly. So what does that mean for you? If I tell you the moon is what about your emotions, both good and bad, and the heart is really about what you love and are passionate about. What comes up for you when you think about in your business moving, starting with the moon and all your emotions, but moving into the heart with your passions and love?
I don't know yet.
What is your intuition tell you? Okay, you want to write that down as a question?
Yes.
Question to think about. Yeah. Don't expect to get all the information right away. Sometimes the reading brings up a question and you're like, actually, that's a really good point. I'm not even sure what that would mean. What am I still passionate? Because what you're passionate about at the beginning of your business may not be what you're passionate about now. You've grown. Maybe you were simply passionate about starting a business. And now that it's started, you're like, okay, well, I started it, but what do I love? Where's my heart? You know, often at the beginning of businesses, we just do whatever people will pay us for. And then at some point we're like, okay, well, now I'm doing 6 different things. Which of these is really where my heart is?
Yeah, most of the time I have a hard time tapping into my emotions. So that question is kind of like foreign to me.
Yeah. That's very common. And I will say that when people feel compelled to please their family, it can be very difficult to tap into your emotions because you can feel like it's somehow like disloyal or selfish to be honest about what you love and what you want, because you should be helping others or serving your family or making them feel comfortable or something like that. But I will say that especially when it comes to running your business, you're probably helping them the most by making a successful business.
Right.
So it's not actually selfish. And you're most likely to have a successful business by loving it, because business is a lot of work. And the more you love it, the more happy you are to put in the work and the less draining it is. So the more actual work you're able to do.
And then one last question. The tower means almost the same as it does in tarot?
No, the opposite. Yeah. So
Destruction?
in the tarot, the tower is the blasted tower, right? And it means destruction. Something's falling, something's being destroyed. And in Lenormand cards, it's the opposite. It's the strong tower.
Okay.
It's the strength, the security, but it's a neutral card for a reason, because we think about strength and security as good, and that is good. But the tower can also have the downside of something that you get walled up in your tower. Like you're like, oh no, I'm only secure if I'm doing this. Like you end up clinging to your security and it becomes hard to leave and explore the countryside for resources. So you have to look in yourself and think, you know, is the security that I'm experiencing something I need more of that would help my business? It would help me focus? Or do I need to get a little more adventurous and maybe be willing to experiment and leave my security so that I could try something new or figure out what I'm really passionate about, or let go of those old offerings that are very profitable, but they don't really light my fire anymore. You can see that the tower's sort of between the heart and the birds. So there might be some tendency to take security in other people, and you need to transfer that to taking security in your own passions.
I took a screenshot and so I could dissect it more.
Yeah, and you're welcome to email me. If you're like looking at this tomorrow and you're like, hey, I thought of a such and such, what do you think about that? Just send me an email. And we can discuss it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for putting this example on camera. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody who's on the replay, and I'll stop the replay in a second. Anybody else can stick around. I have a few more minutes. But yeah, thank you for watching this replay. I hope this has been helpful for you. I would love to hear about your Lenormand adventures. And we are going to continue our Lenormand salons, because as today's replay showed, there's a bunch of techniques we haven't even gotten to yet, like the playing cards and the diagonals and the 9-card reading and the circle, and then a lot more cool Grand Tableau stuff, which we haven't worked on. So thank you guys so much, and I will see you at our next salon.